What's up, everybody? Happy Saturday to you. Hope everyone is having an amazing weekend. I know today's been very restful, definitely helpful to me. Got out and got some cardio done earlier, and now jumping on here real quickly to share a couple things that have been on my mind, and yeah, hope it brings you some benefit. Hope it brings you some value, and definitely look forward to any questions or any interactions as well that you have. As I always say, I'm doing this from more of a devotional type perspective, not going into any super deep, hermeneutical or philosophical or theological deep dive. Um, but at the same time, I do hope to bring some value to your life, and yeah, some encouragement as well. So with that being said, I want to talk for a few minutes on endurance, and in this modern day and age, it is easy to want to see quick results, to get that microwave mindset where we want something to happen now. We see this in all kinds of things. Go from being broke to a millionaire in 5 weeks, working from home on a laptop, or drop 100 pounds in my 4 week crush your body plan, or whatever the case is. And half the stuff, unfortunately, is not realistic. The truth of the matter is, our life is a journey. We're in a race, not in a sprint, but definitely in a marathon. We're put on this earth, a spiritual being, each of us spiritual beings created in God's image and His likeness, put inside a human suit, as it were, to accomplish what God's put on the earth for us to do. No one promises that the journey will be easy, but Jesus does tell us that His yoke is easy and His burden's light. And as I have mentioned before, I truly believe that burden rests primarily in loving God and loving people. Some days it's a burden, though. We folks aren't always easy to deal with. But the truth of the matter is, God doesn't really give us an option. It's a commandment. To love God and love people are two commandments. In fact, Jesus mentions them. They're in red, as it were. So, yeah, like it or not, there they are. Some of us struggle, though, with the burden of loving ourselves, which makes it even harder to, love others. Regardless, though, the commandment doesn't go away. Further, the Bible reminds us, too, that the gifts and callings of God are without repentance. So He gives them freely. And they don't just go away because you choose to ignore them or run from them, or, to be blunt, choose to be a moron. They're still there. And it's up to you to embrace them and to maximize them, because we will be held accountable for what we do and don't do with our gifting and with our calling. And, the question is here, are you willing to do what it takes to use them, to learn how to maximize your gifts and your calling? Are you willing to endure, even suffer, if need be? So with that being said, I want to look here for a few minutes again, like I said, on endurance. Hebrews 12 verses 1 through 13. Please pardon my sweet dog, who is I'm house sitting for. Lola. That's enough. She gets excited. Woo. Probably noticing somebody out front, and anyway. But anyway, Hebrews 12, 1 through 3, 1 through 13 comes after the quote-unquote faith chapter there in Hebrews 11, which accounts for many heroes of the faith. And you can read tons of examples, as the writer of Hebrews points out that, faith is the evidence of things hoped for, or the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And then he goes into all these examples, Abraham and David and all these basically heroes of the Christian faith. And after that long list of heroes, the writer then goes on to say, therefore, since we're surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. After all, you've not yet given your lives in your struggle against sin. And have you forgotten the encouraging words that God spoke to you as his children? He said, my child, don't make light of the Lord's discipline, and don't give up when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines those who he loves, and he punishes each one each one he accepts as his child. Get my tongue tangled there. As you endure this divine discipline, remember that God is treating you as his own children. Who ever heard of a child never being disciplined by its father? If God doesn't discipline you as he does all of his children, that means you're illegitimate and really not his at all. Since we respected our earthly fathers who disciplined us, should we not submit even more to the discipline of the Father of our spirits, and live forever? For our earthly fathers disciplined us for a few years, doing the best they knew how. But God's discipline is always good for us, so that we might share in his holiness. No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful, in fact. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. So take new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so those who are weak and lame will not fall but become strong. So the writer brings up a multitude of points here in these 13 verses, but I want to point out a couple. Number one, remember that this is a journey. This is not a sprint. We're all called to run the same race. We're all called to endure the same way. Perseverance and endurance come through embracing the struggle and embracing the mundane. Not everything in our lives will be a divine moment or a huge event. We keep looking for these great, mind-blowing, earth-shattering events. And some of God's greatest miracles happen in the everyday, the normal, the mundane, as it were. The little things that you do. Some of your greatest breakthroughs will happen in your normal everyday habits, whether it be good or bad. And it's these disciplines that keep us moving forward. So we embrace the normal. We create and maintain good habits. We trust God and trust his process, and we stick it out, completely trusting him. One item I want to know that makes this easier is to do what the writer says and to keep our eyes on Jesus. He authored our faith when we came to him to give our lives to him, to pursue a relationship with him. And the word says he's the perfecter or the finisher of our faith, which means he committed to finishing it. Paul even references that earlier in the New Testament when he says, he who began a good work in you will complete it in the day of Jesus. So, when you're feeling weary and tired, as we all will, this passage says that Jesus is the author and the finisher, the perfecter of our faith. If you're still here, you're not finished, and neither is he. So keep that in mind. It's not all bad. This too shall pass. Jesus leads us by example as he endured the agony of the cross for the promise of a greater glory and a fulfillment in of God's bigger plan. So if we think for a moment that we're exempt from suffering, you're sadly mistaken. That's part of the life, part of the human experience. It just is. Now, suffering obviously comes in different grades. For some, we joke about our third world problems. This ran out, or we have to, something happened with the water main on your street and you're without water for a couple of days, or the big storm we had here in Kansas City last night caused some power outages, even if they were just temporarily. So, yeah, those are our sufferings of a sense. But just remember, there are worse. Some people still on this planet die for the cause of Christ and for knowing Him. Jesus, of course, Himself suffered the agony of the cross and endured what He did. So, even the writer here puts it, after all, take strength from God, from Jesus's example, because you haven't endured for fighting sin yet. You haven't died for the gospel yet. You haven't really suffered in the bigger picture. Now, we all have our own issues. We all run into our own life challenges. But unfortunately, a lot of our own life challenges are self-inflicted. I know I can say that for myself. Some of the tough spots I end up in and have ended up in my 49 years, yeah, totally just the result of bad decisions on my part. I've not suffered for the gospel. I haven't been shipwrecked. I haven't been stoned and left for dead like Paul was. I wasn't hung on a cross the way Peter was upside down. I wasn't hung on a cross right side up the way Jesus was. I wasn't tied to 4 different horses and then pulled apart in 4 different directions like other disciples were, martyred for the faith. And not to mention all the modern day martyrs who have died for their faith and for what they believed. So, yeah, let me shed some light here on what other people have really suffered to keep some perspective on what we see as some challenges in our lives. Number 2, a life of endurance will involve discipline. Regardless of how you want to slice it or dice it, discipline is going to be involved. Marathon runners don't just miraculously start running 26.2 miles. They build to that level. They constantly are disciplined in their bodies, how to tweak a few extra seconds of speed here, when to kick it in for the last moment there. It's all a process. It's all a journey to get better at how quickly they can run that 26.2 miles. And so it's an endurance thing. Some discipline will come from creating better habits. Some will come from God directly. As the writer reminds us that God will discipline us to grow us and for our highest good. Now, the writer here also refers to earthly father's discipline. I had my share of that as a kid, as I'm sure most of us have. And most of it I deserved because, I was very hard-headed. But the intent was to make me better, and then how much more? If earthly fathers just, do the best they can with what they have, the writer reminds us, how much more will God discipline us for our highest good? He loves us with a love that we can't be separated from, as Romans 8 reminds us. So granted, discipline's not a joyous process. It's not a joyous event, but it's administered with the end game in mind. As we commit to discipline our bodies and workouts, with workouts and a meal plan, it's not always just, hey, I'm going to put myself through 80 shades of crazy, and that's that. No, it's for an end game. It's to be stronger. It's to be healthier, maybe to drop extra weight or what have you. A run at midnight isn't necessarily pleasant, but it's necessary to get the job done to reach the end result. And God's no different. So He may address something that's a little off in your life and allow life circumstances to help you deal with that thing, all with the goal of making you your best self. The writer tells us that God's discipline allows us to share in His holiness. Now, how awesome is that? God is an amazing and holy God. Separate. So above and beyond any sin and any it's just amazing. He's beyond words. And we're allowed to share in that as we commit to His discipline. One way to make the quote-unquote suffering easier in some regards is to commit to the discipline instead of necessarily, flopping ourselves on the ground and having a spoiled brat tantrum. kicking and screaming, as it were. That doesn't get anything done. That just makes your life more difficult. I can attest. Um, you know, I used to, as most people probably haven't figured out by now. I was called to be a minister of the gospel, and was my senior in high school. I committed to go to learning all I could about the Bible. Got a degree, went to seminary. Uh, all jokes, seriously. I cherish my time, both in undergrad and in grad school, and met some very beautiful, wonderful people. Learned a lot, and was humbled because I realized just how much I did not know. It just took me 2 degrees. Some people realize, hey, I don't know much to begin with. Again, being the hard-headed person I am, it took me 2 degrees to realize I don't know that much. But no, anyway, in all seriousness, beautiful people, beautiful relationships to this day that I have because of college and seminary. But I committed to that and ran into, had the honor of going back to teach at my alma mater as a professor, and then realized that I was teaching from all book knowledge, which is fine, except that I wanted to make more of an impact. I knew that it wasn't how well I could regurgitate knowledge that would help people, but it was how I lived my life, how I managed to make it through things, or how I managed to overcome things that would be more impactful. And so I went on and jumped out there into active ministry. Was very young, very, very immature. Made a lot of mistakes, no doubt. And was hurt through a couple of relationships, which I'm not going to go into any detail about. That is neither here nor there. It was part of the growing process, and it was designed to make me better, just like I'm pointing out with this passage. And instead of embracing that discipline and acknowledging the things that I needed to work on, I took it and created this huge, painful ordeal and ran. I stepped away from ministry and went back into the business world through restaurant management, and all the while, God continued to deal with me. And I stepped away after many years of restaurant management to try to go back into full-time ministry. And yeah, nothing happened. And then I realized, you know what? You still got mouths to feed. You still got a family to take care of. So I went back into to working, and realizing there were still things God was going, hey, I want you to work on this. I need you to deal with this. I need you to address this. And for many years, continued to run from that discipline, being again a spoiled brat, as it were. Looking for an easy way. And there's just not one. Anything worth having is going to cost you something. Anything worth doing there's going to be struggle involved to overcome. That's what makes us better. The process is what makes us stronger. Not having everything go your way. Not having everything easy. You don't get bigger muscles by not lifting weights. Not creating a resistance to push against. So, it is what it is. And I had I guess for lack of a better way of putting it, a breakthrough, talking with a friend about a week and a half ago, and finally said, whatever happens to me, I have to admit and accept and embrace the fact that I'm a minister of the gospel. That's what I'm called to do. I'm called to preach. Period. Now, whether that be from a pastoral perspective, or whether it be from just living a better life, being a better example, I don't know yet how that's going to play out. but I'm definitely not running from it anymore. Now, do I make mistakes? Oh, yeah. And for anybody out there that thinks that ministers have it all together, you really have got to get a dose of reality, because we're human, just like you. Do we make mistakes? Absolutely. Do we still need to work on bettering our own finances? Yep. On creating better habits for ourselves? Yep. Do we need to be better examples? Absolutely. In a lot of regards. We can't talk about being faithful to God's path and God's discipline and then run to be the first to the buffet line on Sunday when we don't even have our own health in order. So we're human. We're human. And to refuse to or to insist on putting ministers on a pedestal is dangerous. It is. We are on our own journey as well, for God to make us better, for God to make us stronger, to be a better example. So don't go into a church thinking that the minister's got it all together and that he or she is perfect, because we're not. We're human too. We're on the same race. We're in the same exact journey with you. And that leads to my third point. Just as we have examples and heroes of the faith to look to draw strength from, there will be people looking to us to be a current day hero of the faith. In other words, you may be somebody else's hero by putting your nose to the grind and overcoming something in your life, and then sharing that story, sharing that struggle. Here's how I overcame, an addiction to porn, or how I overcame hiding from relationships and being stuck and addicted to masturbation, or how I overcome a drinking problem, or how I overcame a smoking problem, or how I overcame a toxic personality. Whatever the case is, I mean, there's tons of examples to pull from, each in our own lives. But when you get tired and you think to yourself, why do I continue this path of discipline? Why should I endure? Because others are watching. Not just God. But when you think nobody else sees the small habits you put in, the small things you do to better yourself, people notice. They're watching. Some are even praying and searching for another person from where they can draw inspiration. They can draw strength. Sometimes even draw their own reason to keep going. Not just keep going the journey, but just to live. I mean, sometimes your life example may be what keeps somebody from the final act and committing suicide. Believe it or not, somebody's always watching. The more you submit to God's discipline, the more you press into the journey, the more that God will cause others to notice. Your story could help save others' lives, like I said. You just don't know. God wants to use each of us, but he's not going to if we're going to be kicking and screaming and acting like spoiled brats. That's just, So you want to be more faithful? Submit to the discipline that God puts in front of you. You want to be more impactful to the world around you and to reach other people? Embrace that suck. Embrace the mundane. Build those habits. Embrace the discipline. You want to be a hero? Strive to be humble and stay focused on God. In short, the heroes of faith that we read about in Hebrews 11 have paid it forward so that we can draw strength from their example and commit to endure to the end. Now it's our turn to pay it forward to those who come behind us, those who are walking alongside us, as it were. So I implore you today, on this beautiful Saturday, put aside the microwave mentality, the cushion, the comfort mentality that the American lifestyle and social media is notorious for, and embrace a new level of discipline in your life so that you can be an example to others. Let's put aside the idea of posting fake perfection on social media and instead post our realness. all the good and all the bad. It's your vulnerabilities and weaknesses that will encourage others, and how you overcame a situation that will minister to others, not your perfection. Because we all know that that's impossible anyway. None of us can be perfect. The Bible just reminds us to strive to be. Strive to get better every day. Better habits, 1% increases, 1% improvements, doing whatever it takes to get better each day. Lord, I pray that we would embrace the journey, embrace the discipline, and simply just pursue you. Let us put aside the mentality of acting like a pampered child and pursue the discipline that you've put before us so that we can run the race. Let us be transformed by renewing our minds in your presence so that we can increase our kingdom impact and be able to better help other people. Amen. Guys, I love you. Be blessed. I wish you the best this weekend. And I pray and hope that God makes himself real to you in a whole new way today. Have a great one.